Transaction declined $13,700 at Royal Caribbean Cruises. I stared at my phone screen in the middle of a client meeting, my blood running cold. When I called my mother, she laughed and said, Tiana needs this vacation more than you do. Besides, you never go anywhere anyway. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply said, enjoy your trip. While they were sailing the ocean drinking cocktails on my dime, I sold the house they were living in rent-free. When they returned to find the locks changed and a bulldozer in the driveway, my phone lit up with 29 missed calls. My name is Keisha King, and at 34 years old, I am a forensic accountant in Atlanta. I hunt down financial fraud for a living, yet I miss the biggest thieves right under my nose, my own family. If you have ever felt like an ATM for people who claim to love you, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe because you are not going to believe the level of entitlement in this story. The nightmare began on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of presenting a fraud analysis to a Fortune 500 client when my Apple Watch buzzed on my wrist. I glanced down expecting an email, but instead, I saw a fraud alert from my bank. $13,700 charged to my emergency credit card. The card I had given my parents strictly for medical emergencies or life or death situations. I excused myself from the boardroom, my hands trembling not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated rage. I dialed my mother Bernice immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice chirpy and bright, completely unbothered. Mom, did you just charge $14,000 to my card? I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady in the office hallway. Oh, Keisha, stop being so dramatic, she replied, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. It is Tiana and Chad's anniversary. They have been having such a hard time lately with Chad's art career stalling, and Tiana needs a break from the stress. We booked them the owner suite on the new mega cruise ship. It is a gift from the family. A gift from the family, I repeated, my voice rising. You mean a gift from me? I did not agree to this. That card is for emergencies. Mom, this is theft. Bernice let out a long sigh, the kind she saved for when she thought I was being unreasonable. You make six figures, Keisha. You sit in that fancy office all day while your sister struggles to keep her marriage alive. Why are you so stingy? You know Tiana is the sensitive one. She needs this luxury to feel like herself again. Besides, it is already booked non-refundable. Just pay it off. You will not even miss it. I hung up the phone before I said something that would get me fired. I told my boss I had a family emergency, which was technically true. I drove across town to the four-bedroom colonial house I had bought 3 years ago. The house I let my parents and my sister and her husband live in for absolutely $0 a rent. As I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. It looked like a circus. There were suitcases everywhere, designer luggage that I know Tiana could not afford stacked high on the porch. An Uber XL was idling in the driveway. Tiana was standing there in a wide-brimmed hat and a white sundress, looking like she was ready for a Vogue photo shoot, while Chad sat on my porch steps playing on a Nintendo Switch, ignoring the chaos. They looked ready to live their best life on my dime. I slammed my car door and marched up the driveway. My mother stepped out of the front door, beaming until she saw my face. Oh, look, Tiana, your sister came to see you off. Isn't that sweet? I stepped past my mother and crossed the threshold into the house I had purchased with my first big bonus check 3 years ago. The smell hit me instantly. It was a thick, cloying mixture of stale pizza grease, damp laundry that had been left in the washer too long, and that cheap floral air freshener my mother used to mask the scent of neglect. This was a $500,000 property in a respectable Atlanta suburb, a home I had meticulously renovated with crown molding and hardwood floors. But right now, it felt more like a fraternity house after a weekend bender. I walked into the living room and felt my heart hammer against my ribs. My 85-inch Sony Bravia, a housewarming gift I had foolishly left here so my parents could watch their Sunday shows in comfort, was blasting the sounds of gunfire and explosions at maximum volume. Chad was sprawled across the Italian leather sofa, his feet propped up on the coffee table, shoes still on. He was wearing sweatpants that looked like they had not been washed in weeks, screaming into a headset while mashing buttons on a controller. He did not even look up when I walked in. He just shifted his weight, digging his heel deeper into the expensive leather I had spent months saving for. Then there was Tiana. She was standing in front of the hallway mirror, the one with the antique gold frame I had found at an estate sale. She was modeling a neon pink bikini that looked like it cost more than my weekly grocery budget, turning side to side to check her angles. She looked radiant, healthy, and completely unbothered by the fact that her lifestyle was being funded by grand larceny. "Do you think this is too much for the pool deck?" she asked, speaking to her reflection rather than to me or her husband. She smoothed her hands over her hips, admiring herself. I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that she genuinely believed she deserved this. She believed the world owed her this trip. I marched over to the television and yanked the power cord directly from the wall. The screen went black and the room fell into a sudden ringing silence. Chad jumped up, throwing his headset onto the floor. "Hey, what is your problem, Keisha? I was in a ranked match. You stole $13,000 from me," I said, my voice low and dangerous, shaking with the effort to keep from screaming. "You are going to cancel this trip right now. You are going to get every single penny refunded, or I am calling the police and reporting credit card fraud." My father, Otis, shuffled into the room from the kitchen. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped in that perpetual posture of defeat he wore whenever he had to choose between doing the right thing and keeping my mother happy. He held a half-eaten sandwich and refused to meet my eyes, focusing instead on a spot on the carpet. "Now, Keisha, let us be reasonable," he mumbled, his voice thin and wavering. "It is already paid for, baby girl. If they cancel now, the money is gone anyway. It is non-refundable. Just let them go. Let them have this one nice thing. You know how hard Chad has been trying with his art? You can afford it. You know you can." I stared at him, feeling the betrayal slice deeper than the theft itself. It was not just that they took the money. It was that he, my own father, was standing there telling me to accept it. He was telling me that my hard work, my long nights, my sacrifices existed solely to fund their delusions of grandeur. Chad laughed then, a short, sharp sound that made my skin crawl. He picked up his controller and tossed it onto the cushion, crossing his arms over his chest with a smirk that made me want to evict him on the spot. "See, this is why you are single, Keisha," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You are so uptight. You act like a bitter old librarian who hates seeing other people happy. Let Tiana live a little. Maybe if you loosened up and stopped counting every penny, you would not be so miserable all the time." I opened my mouth to scream, to tell him exactly who was paying for the roof over his lazy head, to tell him that he was living in my house, eating my food, and stealing my money. But a loud honk from the driveway cut me off. The Uber was here. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Panic and excitement replaced the awkward tension. My mother started clapping her hands, herding everyone toward the door, like a shepherd moving sheep. "Come on, we cannot miss our flight," she chirped, completely ignoring my presence now that their escape vehicle had arrived. "Grab the bags, Chad. Tiana, honey, do not forget your sun hat." Tiana grabbed her carry-on, pushing past me as if I were a piece of furniture that had been placed inconveniently in her path. She did not look at me. She did not thank me. She just focused on the door, her eyes bright with the promise of a vacation she had not earned. Chad followed her, shouldering a backpack and shooting me one last mocking grin as he brushed by. They streamed out the door, a parade of entitlement, leaving a wake of silence behind them. My mother stopped on the porch just for a second. I thought for a brief, foolish moment that she might apologize, that she might hug me and say she would pay me back, but she did not. She just looked back over her shoulder, adjusting her sunglasses. "Since you are here, make sure you lock up tight when you leave," she called out, her voice breezy and casual. "And maybe water the plants in the sunroom. They look a little dry. Watch the house for us, okay?" The door slammed shut, leaving me standing alone in the silence of the home I paid for, surrounded by their mess. the echo of their laughter fading as the car drove away. The silence that filled the house after the Uber drove away was heavy and suffocating. My hands were still shaking, but the red-hot rage that had threatened to consume me a moment ago began to cool into something harder and much more dangerous. I looked at the 85-inch television still sitting on the wall. The urge to pick up a heavy vase and smash the screen into 1,000 glittering shards was almost overwhelming. I wanted to destroy everything they had touched. I wanted to rip the curtains off the rods and overturn the furniture. But I did not move. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I am a forensic accountant. I do not act on impulse. I do not throw tantrums. I gather evidence. I build a case. And then I execute. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the camera app. I started in the living room, documenting every inch of the disrespect. I took photos of the stains on the rug, the scratches on the hardwood floor from Chad, dragging his gaming chair back and forth, and the half-empty soda cans, leaving rings on the antique side tables. Then I moved down the hallway. The walls were scuffed and dirty, but what caught my eye was a series of poorly patched holes near the ceiling. It looked like Chad had tried to mount shelves or speakers without a stud finder, and had simply given up, leaving the drywall crumbling and exposed. I pushed open the door to what used to be my bedroom. When I bought this house, I had envisioned this room as a guest suite, or maybe a home office for myself on the rare occasions I worked from here. Instead, it looked like a storage unit that had been ransacked. Boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls, toppling over with old clothes and broken electronics. The air smelled stale like old smoke and dirty laundry. I stepped over a pile of shoes that definitely did not belong to my mother and made my way to the bed. I knelt down and lifted the dust ruffle. I do not know what made me look there. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the fact that my mother always hid her mistakes where she thought no one would look. Underneath the frame, shoved far back against the wall, was a plastic bin. I dragged it out and popped the lid. It was full of envelopes. Unopened envelopes. I picked up the first one. It was a disconnect notice from the power company. The next one was a final warning from the water department. There were letters from collection agencies addressed to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. I gave my parents $1,500 a month specifically for utilities and upkeep. I transferred it automatically to my mother's account on the first of every month. They had been taking that money, pocketing it, and shoving the bills under the bed, hoping I would not notice until the lights went out. They were ruining my credit score while living in my house for free. I stood up, clutching the stack of overdue bills, my mind racing. This was bad. This was financial abuse. But I had not found the smoking gun yet. I turned toward the corner of the room where Chad had set up a makeshift desk. It was a cheap particle board table covered in energy drink cans and loose papers. I started sifting through the mess. There were sketches of his terrible art rejection letters from galleries and receipts for expensive gaming equipment. Then I saw it. A manila folder tucked beneath a stack of comic books. It was labeled in Chad's messy scrawl house project. I opened it expecting to find renovation ideas or maybe paint swatches. Instead, I found legal printouts. The first page was an article printed from a legal advice website titled Understanding Adverse Possession in Georgia. I froze. I flipped the page. There were highlighted sections about squatters' rights and the timeline required to claim ownership of a property if you occupied it openly and notoriously without the owner's permission. There were notes in the margins in my mother's handwriting. Keep utilities in Keisha's name for now, but switch internet to ours for proof of residency. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath my feet. I flipped to the next document. It was a drafted affidavit, a sworn statement claiming that I had abandoned the property and that they had been the sole caretakers for the last 5 years. They were lying about the timeline. They had only been here for 2 years, but they were building a paper trail to steal my house. This was not just about a vacation. This was not just about them being lazy or entitled or bad with money. This was a calculated conspiracy. My mother and my sister and her husband were plotting to take the deed to my home. They were waiting for the right moment, probably once they hit the statutory time limit, to file a quiet title action and lock me out of my own property. They wanted to steal a $500,000 asset out from under me while I was busy working to feed them. I stared at the papers in my hand. The shock evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They thought they were smart. They thought they could outmaneuver me because I was the nice one, the quiet one, the one who just paid the bills and looked the other way. They forgot what I did for a living. I tracked down embezzlers who are smarter than Chad and more ruthless than my mother. I took photos of every single page. I put the folder back exactly where I found it, ensuring the corner of the comic book covered the label just as it had before. I stood up and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind me. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, drinking it in one long swallow. Then I picked up my phone. I did not call my mother. I did not call the police. I scrolled past my family contact list and tapped on the number for my attorney. It was time to go to war. This was no longer a family dispute. This was an attempted robbery, and I was about to catch them in the act. The phone rang once, twice, and then a sharp professional voice answered. "This is Robert." "Robert?" I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I need you to prepare a sale agreement immediately. I am selling the house on Maple Drive. Today. And I need to know the eviction laws for guests who have overstayed their welcome, because I am about to make 3 people homeless." Robert listened to my discovery in silence for a full minute before he finally spoke. His tone was professional, but grim, the voice of a man who had seen too many family disputes turn into legal bloodbaths. He told me that under Georgia law, since my family had been receiving mail at the house and had keys, they were considered tenants at will. Even without a lease or rent payments, they had rights. If I changed the locks while they were gone, they could sue me for illegal eviction. If I filed for formal eviction, it would require a 60-day notice followed by a court date. With the adverse possession documents, I found they could tie this property up in litigation for 6 months, maybe a year. They could live there for free while I paid the legal fees to fight them. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. 6 months. I would have to watch Chad destroy my walls and listen to my mother gaslight me for another 6 months while they legally stole my asset. I told Robert that was not an option. I needed them out now. Robert hesitated before suggesting the nuclear option. He said that if I no longer owned the property, the new owner would not be bound by the same emotional constraints and could handle the removal differently, or I could sell the problem to someone else. But selling a house with squatters is nearly impossible on the open market. No family wants to buy a home that comes with a lawsuit. I hung up the phone and stared at the water damage on the ceiling. I did not need a family to buy this house. I needed a shark. And in my line of work investigating financial fraud for major corporations, I had crossed paths with plenty of sharks. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Marcus Sterling. He was a hard money lender and a real estate investor who bought distressed assets in cash. He was known in Atlanta for 2 things: closing deals in 48 hours and having absolutely zero mercy. I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, his voice deep and impatient. I cut straight to the chase. I told him I had a single-family home in the Cascade area sitting on a half-acre lot, appraised at $550,000. I told him I wanted to sell it today. Sterling went quiet. He knew the area. He knew the value. He asked me what was wrong with it. I told him the foundation was solid and the roof was new, but it came with significant baggage in the form of uninvited guests who were currently out of the country. Sterling laughed, a dry, raspy sound. He said he did not mind baggage, but he minded price. He offered me $440,000, cash, closing in 2 days. That was more than $100,000 under market value. A 20% loss. My accountant brain screamed at the numbers. That was a massive financial hit. But then I looked at the folder of legal documents Chad had printed. I looked at the unpaid bills. I thought about the $13,000 cruise charge, This was not a loss. This was the price of my freedom. I told him I accepted. There was a pause on the line. Sterling dropped his voice. He said he had one condition. He was planning to rezone the lot for a multi-unit development, so he did not care about the condition of the interior. But he would not sign the papers if there were people or possessions inside. He required the property to be vacant at the time of closing. Vacant meant empty. No furniture, no clothes, no squatters. I looked around the living room. It was filled with 3 years of accumulated junk. Tiana's designer clothes were stuffed into the closets. Chad's gaming collection lined the shelves. My mother's antique china cabinet took up half the dining room. They were gone for 10 days. The house was physically empty of people, but it was full of their lives. I told Sterling to have the papers ready. I told him the house would be empty by noon tomorrow. I hung up the phone and looked at the mountain of entitlement surrounding me. They thought their possessions made this their home. They thought leaving their things here staked their claim. I walked to the window and watched a squirrel run across the overgrown lawn. A cold smile spread across my face for the first time that day. They wanted a vacation. I would give them a homecoming they would never forget. I picked up my phone again and searched for industrial cleaning crews. I was going to make this house vacant. While my family was sipping pre-flight champagne in the Delta Sky Club, I was standing in the driveway watching a convoy of white vans pull up. My phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Tiana had posted a selfie with Chad and my parents holding mimosas. The caption read, "Finally escaping the negative energy, living our best life, while some people stay bitter." I stared at the screen. They looked so smug, so confident that the bill would never come due. I opened my banking app. There were pending charges for luggage upgrades and airport sushi. My finger hovered over the freeze card button. Not yet. I needed them on that plane. I needed them in the air over the ocean, completely unable to turn back. I waited until I saw the flight status change to departed before I closed the app. They were gone. The lead van door slid open and a man named Alvarez stepped out. He ran a crew that specialized in foreclosures and hoarders. I had told him I needed a level 4 clear-out. He looked at the house, then at me. "You want us to pack it or trash it?" he asked, his clipboard ready. I looked at the manicured lawn I used to be so proud of. "Trash it," I said. "If it is not nailed down, it goes. If it is nailed down, pry it off. I want this house to look like nobody has lived here in 10 years. I walked back inside with Alvarez to tag the items. We moved room by room. The living room was first. As I pointed to the 85-inch television to be taken down, I noticed something odd about the wall behind where Chad had set up his gaming station. There was a massive, jagged hole covered poorly by a poster. I pulled the poster down. Chad had drilled straight into the drywall, presumably to mount a bracket, but he had missed the stud and kept drilling. He had bored right into the main support beam. There were cracks radiating out from the hole like a spider web. Alvarez whistled low and shook his head. "Lady, he compromised the load-bearing stud. That is structural damage." I pulled out my phone and took a high-resolution photo. Destruction of property. It was the final nail in the coffin for any claim they might have had to tenancy rights. They were not tenants, they were vandals. The crew swarmed the house like locusts. It was a symphony of destruction. I watched as they swept my mother's collection of porcelain figurines into heavy-duty trash bags. I watched them dismantle Chad's gaming chair and toss it out the window into the dumpster they had parked in the driveway. The sound of breaking glass and tearing wood was the most satisfying thing I had heard in years. They stripped the sheets off the beds. They emptied the refrigerator. They cleared out the bathroom cabinets, dumping expensive creams and colognes into the bin. I was standing in Tiana's room watching a worker pull armfuls of clothes from the closet when Alvarez walked in holding 2 orange dust bags. He looked confused. He held them up. "These look real," he said. "Hermes and Louis Vuitton. You want us to trash these too or put them in the sell pile?" I walked over and took the bags. I opened one. It was a Birkin. a bag that cost more than my car. Tiana had been crying poverty for years, begging me for gas money while hoarding $10,000 handbags. I looked at the leather smooth and perfect. No. I set a plan forming in the back of my mind. Do not throw these away. Keep them separate. I have a very specific use for them. I sat on a folding chair in the middle of the now empty living room, sipping black coffee and watching my sister broadcast her theft to the world. On the screen, she was spinning around a hotel room that cost more per night than my first car, the presidential suite at the Atlantis in the Bahamas. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over turquoise water. A waiter in a white tuxedo was pouring Dom Perignon into crystal flutes. My mother was reclining on a velvet chaise lounge, waving at the camera like royalty. "We are just so blessed," Tiana chirped, blowing a kiss to her followers. "Sometimes you just have to treat yourself, because you deserve it." I took a slow sip of coffee. Deserve it. That was their favorite phrase. They deserve the world while I deserve to foot the bill. I set the phone down, propping it against a bottle of industrial cleaner so I could keep watching. It was fuel. Every bite of lobster Chad shoved into his mouth, every toast my father made to family success, every smug smile from Tiana hardened my resolve. They were celebrating their victory, but they did not know the war had already ended. I stood up and walked over to the piles I had organized in the center of the room. Alvarez and his crew had done the heavy lifting, clearing out the trash and the furniture, but I had reserved the final sorting for myself. It was a forensic audit of their lives. First was the storage pile. Despite everything, I was not a monster. I picked up a box containing my mother's old photo albums and my father's collection of jazz vinyls. These were the only things of real value in the entire house, not monetary value, but the kind you cannot replace. I taped the box shut and labeled it clearly. I had rented the smallest, cheapest storage unit on the outskirts of town, a 10 by 10 metal box with no climate control. It was safe enough, but they would have to drive 45 minutes to retrieve their memories. It was a kindness they did not earn, but one I granted for the sake of the little girl I used to be who loved them. Then I turned to the profit pile. This was much more interesting. I picked up a pair of limited edition sneakers Chad had left in the hallway. Resale value $400. Into the bin. I found Tiana's collection of sunglasses, Gucci, Prada, Ray-Ban, all bought while she claimed she could not afford health insurance. Into the bin. I gathered Chad's gaming consoles and his stack of mint-condition video games. Into the bin. I worked methodically, checking prices on eBay and Poshmark as I went. My mental calculator was running. The $13,700 cruise charge was just the principal. I was also recovering the interest, the emotional damages, and the cleaning fees. Every item I added to the sell pile was a small clawback of my dignity. On the screen, Tiana was now giving a tour of the bathroom, showing off the jacuzzi tub. "I am never coming home," she giggled. I smiled at the phone. "You are right about that, Tiana," I said to the empty room. "You definitely are not coming home to this address." I checked the time. It was 2 in the afternoon in Atlanta. That meant it was dinner time in the Bahamas. They would be heading down to one of the resort's 5-star restaurants soon, ordering the most expensive items on the menu, confident that the magic plastic card would cover it all. It was time. I picked up my phone, closing the Instagram app. I opened my banking app one last time. The pending charges were stacking up. Spa treatments, cabana rentals, room service. They were burning through my credit limit with impressive speed. I took a screenshot for the police report I would file later. Then I dialed the number for customer service. The automated voice asked for my reason for calling. I bypassed the menu and pressed 0 for an operator. I waited on hold, listening to the smooth jazz music tapping my fingers against my leg. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I felt completely calm. It was the calm of a person who has already pulled the trigger and is just waiting for the bullet to land. "Thank you for calling Chase Sapphire Support. This is Brenda," a cheerful voice said. How can I help you today, Ms. King? Hi, Brenda. I said, my voice crisp and professional. I am calling to report a stolen card. I have reason to believe there are several fraudulent transactions being made in the Bahamas right now. I need you to cancel the card immediately and flag all recent activity as unauthorized. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry to hear that. Brenda said, her typing clicking in the background. Let me pull that up for you. Yes, I see significant activity here. Royal Caribbean, the Atlantis, dining charges. You are saying these were not made by you. That is correct, I said, watching a spider crawl across the floor where my mother's favorite rug used to be. I am currently in Atlanta, Georgia. I did not authorize anyone to use my card for a vacation. Please shut it down. All of it. Done, Brenda said. The card is declined effective immediately. Is there anything else? No, Brenda, I said. That will be all. I hung up the phone. The lifeline was cut. They were thousands of miles away in a foreign country, living like kings and queens, and their carriage had just turned back into a pumpkin. I picked up my coffee and took another sip. It tasted better than champagne. In the Bahamas, the sun had set, and my family was seated at the best table in the resort's signature seafood restaurant. I could picture it perfectly because Tiana had posted a story 10 minutes ago captioned "Eating like royalty." They had ordered the seafood tower, the Wagyu beef, and another bottle of vintage champagne. They were laughing, toasting to their good fortune, and probably making jokes about how I was back in Atlanta working while they lived the dream. My father was likely relaxing back in his chair, feeling like a king, while Chad was probably already complaining that the service wasn't fast enough. Then the bill came. I imagined the waiter approaching, a polite smile on his face, holding the leather folder. My mother would have waved her hand dismissively, telling him to put it on the room which was linked to my card. The waiter would have nodded and walked away. 5 minutes later, he would have returned. The smile would be tighter this time, a little less genuine. I imagined the hushed whisper, the lean in so the other tables wouldn't hear. I am sorry, ma'am, but the card was declined. My mother would have laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Try it again, she would say. It must be a mistake. It is a platinum card. The waiter would try again. Declined. Then the panic would start. My father Otis would step up, trying to save face. He would pull out his own credit card, the one he kept for emergencies. What he forgot, or maybe chose to ignore, was that his credit was ruined years ago by a bad investment scheme. I had co-signed for that card to help him rebuild his score. I was the guarantor. When I called the bank, I froze that one too. Declined. My phone began to vibrate on the folding chair beside me. It started as a single buzz, then another, then a continuous angry hum that rattled against the metal. I looked at the screen. Mom, Mom, Mom. Then Tiana, then Chad, then Dad. The names flashed by in a frantic parade. They were calling me. They were texting me. Caps lock on. Pick up the phone, Keisha. What is going on? The cards are not working. We are at dinner, fix this now. I watched the screen light up, the dark living room. 1 missed call. 5 missed calls. 10. 29 missed calls in the span of 12 minutes. It was a beautiful display of desperation. For years, I had been the one waiting by the phone, hoping for a call back, hoping for an invitation, hoping for a thank you. Now the roles were reversed, and I had absolutely no intention of answering. I picked up the phone, but not to take the call. I went into my email settings. I had prepared a new auto reply earlier while waiting for the cleaning crew to finish. I activated it. It was short, simple, and entirely truthful. It read, I am currently unavailable as I am busy disposing of assets to cover outstanding debts. I will not be checking messages. Please leave a voicemail. I hit save. Back in the restaurant, the situation was deteriorating. I knew the protocol for high-end resorts when payment fails. The polite waiter disappears and the manager arrives. He would not be smiling. He would be holding a printout of their bill, which likely totaled more than $1,000 for just one meal. He would explain in a voice that carried just enough to be humiliating that their room charges had also bounced. I imagined Tiana's face crumbling beneath her layers of expensive makeup. I imagined Chad shrinking into his seat, realizing that his free ride had just hit a brick wall. My mother would be sputtering, demanding to speak to someone higher up, playing the outraged victim. But the computer did not care about her outrage. The computer only cared about the zero balance authorized on the card. A new text message popped up on my screen, this one from Tiana. It was not a plea for help. It was a threat. The manager is here. He says we have to pay now or they are calling the police. Keisha, stop playing games, turn the card back on right now. I swiped the notification away. I did not care. They were adults. They could figure it out. Then came the final blow, the notification that brought a genuine smile to my face. It was an alert from the resort's guest services system, which I still had access to via the booking confirmation email. A change had been made to the reservation. The status of the presidential suite had been updated to vacant. They were being evicted. The hotel was not kicking them out onto the street, not yet, but they were certainly not letting them stay in the $5,000 a night suite without a valid credit card. They were being downgraded. I could see the scene in my mind. The manager standing firm, two security guards hovering in the background, just in case things got loud. He would be giving them a choice. Pay the outstanding balance of $14,000 immediately, or pack their bags and move to a standard room, the smallest one available, facing the parking lot, until they could settle the debt. And they would have to do it now while the lobster was still getting cold on the table. The sun rose over Maple Drive, illuminating the cardboard signs I had staked into the lawn at dawn. I had spent the night sorting, tagging, and pricing every single item my family had left behind. It was a labor of hate, but it was necessary. I taped a large neon poster board to the mailbox. It read simply, "Huge moving sale cash, only everything must go." I was not looking for top dollar. I was looking for speed. I needed to liquidate their assets to cover the debt they had racked up in my name. I lined up Chad's sneaker collection first. He had spent years curating it. Limited edition Jordan's Yeezys pairs he had never even worn. He treated them better than he treated my sister. I slapped a sticker on the first pair. $20. The next pair. $20. I went down the line pricing thousands of dollars worth of footwear for the price of a takeout lunch. Next came Tiana's handbags. The Louis Vuitton tote she bought instead of paying her car note. $50. The Gucci crossbody she claimed was a gift from a wealthy friend. $40. I arranged them like soldiers on the grass waiting to be marched away. By 8 in the morning, the first cars started slowing down. The sharks of the neighborhood, the early bird garage sale hunters, smelled blood in the water. But the first person to actually walk up the driveway was Mrs. Jenkins. She lived 3 houses down and knew everything about everyone. She was the unofficial mayor of Maple Drive and exactly the person I needed to see. She eyed the pile of designer goods and then looked at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Keisha, honey," she said, clutching her robe tight against the morning chill. "Is everything all right? I thought your parents and Tiana were on a cruise. I saw them leave yesterday with all that luggage. Why are you selling Chad's shoes?" I looked at Mrs. Jenkins, and I did not flinch. I did not sugarcoat it. I decided in that moment that I was done protecting their reputation. They certainly had not protected mine. "They are on a cruise," I said, my voice loud enough for the couple browsing the handbags to hear. "They stole my emergency credit card and charged $13,700 to it without my permission. They are currently in the Bahamas spending money they do not have." Mrs. Jenkins gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You are joking. Stealing from their own daughter. I wish I was—" I continued picking up a stack of Chad's video games. But it gets worse. While I was cleaning out the house yesterday, I found legal documents in Chad's desk. They were building a case for adverse possession. They were planning to sue me to take the title of this house because they have lived here rent-free for 2 years. They wanted to steal my home, Mrs. Jenkins. the news ripple through the small crowd that had gathered like an electric shock. In a tight-knit community like this, word traveled faster than light. Mrs. Jenkins' face hardened. She looked from me to the pile of belongings. "That is despicable," she spat out. "After everything you have done for them. I remember when you bought this place for them, so they would not have to downsize." I nodded, piling more clothes onto the table. "That is why I am selling everything. I am recouping the stolen money, and then I am selling the house. They are not coming back here." Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly, a look of fierce solidarity crossing her face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. "Well, then let me help you out. I will take that mixer for my granddaughter. And I am going to call the girls. We need to get this stuff sold." Within an hour, the lawn was swarming. The neighbors were not just buying, they were supporting. It became a community event, a rally against ingratitude. People were buying things they did not even need just to put cash in my hand. I watched Chad's sneaker collection disappear in 20 minutes. Tiana's handbags were gone in 30. The cash box I had set up was filling rapidly. I was keeping a running tally in my head. 5,000. 8,000. We were getting close. Then a neighborhood kid, a boy named Leo who mowed lawns in the summer, walked up the driveway. He was eyeing the stack of electronics I had saved for last. He stopped in front of Chad's pride and joy. The PlayStation 5. Chad played on it every single day, screaming at the TV while I paid the electric bill. Leo looked at it with longing, then looked at his crumpled grass-cutting money. "How much is the game system?" he asked, his voice quiet, expecting to be turned away. I looked at the console. I thought about Chad sitting on my couch, ignoring me while he played. I thought about the holes in the wall. I looked at Leo, a good kid who worked hard. $50, I said. Leo's eyes went wide. 50? Are you sure? I smiled. Positive. But you have to take all the games, too. Get them out of my sight. He scrambled to hand me the cash, his hands shaking with excitement. As he walked away, hugging the console to his chest like a treasure, I felt a surge of pure vindication. Chad was going to come home to nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I had just covered the cost of their first-class flights. While I was watching my neighbors carry away the remnants of my family's entitled existence in Atlanta, a very different scene was unfolding 2,000 miles away. The Bahamas is a paradise if you have money. If you have $0 a declined credit card and an eviction notice from your hotel, it is a humid, mosquito-infested prison. And my family was about to find out just how hot it could get. The manager at the Atlantis had been polite but firm. No payment meant no room. They were escorted out of the lobby past the giant aquarium they had been admiring just hours before and onto the curb with their luggage. The humidity hit them immediately. Tiana was still wearing her dinner dress, a silk slip that was clinging to her in the heat. She was already crying, but not about the theft or the shame. She was crying because she had left her expensive sunscreen in the bathroom and the manager would not let her go back up to get it. They dragged their suitcases down the street looking for a place they could afford with the cash my father had in his wallet. It was not much. They ended up at a motel 3 miles inland, far away from the white sand beaches and the ocean breeze. The sign out front had missing letters, and the pool was empty, filled with leaves and debris. It was a far cry from the owner's suite. As they squeezed into a single room with 2 double beds, the finger-pointing began. It started with Chad. He threw his backpack onto the floor and turned on my parents. "This is ridiculous," he spat, his face red with frustration. "You said this was taken care of. You said Keisha would just pay it like she always does. Now we are stuck in this dump. You two are useless." My father Otis, who had spent his entire life avoiding conflict, finally snapped. He looked at Chad, his son-in-law, who had not worked a real job in 3 years, and exploded. "Useless. We are useless. You are the one living in my daughter's house playing video games all day while she pays the bills. Maybe if you sold a single painting, we would not be in this mess." Then my mother Bernice jumped in, defending her golden child's husband. "Do not talk to him like that, Otis. He is an artist. He is sensitive. This is Keisha's fault." She did this to us. She is probably laughing right now. She is so selfish. She could have just let us finish the trip. And you let her be selfish, Otis shouted back, his voice echoing off the thin motel walls. You enabled Tiana her whole life. You told her she deserved the world without working for it. Now look at us. We are stranded. We are criminals, Bernice. Do you understand that? We stole from her. The argument raged for hours, a toxic cycle of blame and denial. They were trapped in a small room with no air conditioning, sweating and screaming, while the reality of their situation set in. They had no money for food, no money for a flight home, and no way to contact me because I had blocked their numbers. Desperation set in by the second day. They realized they needed a way out. My mother decided to call in the reserves. She pulled out her phone and started dialing relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone who might have a soft spot for a family in distress. She called Aunt Sarah first, spinning a sob story about how they had been robbed at the resort and needed emergency funds for a flight. But I had anticipated this. I knew my mother's playbook better than she did. Before I even started the garage sale, I had sent a mass text to the entire extended family. It was short, professional, and devastating. It read, "Family urgent alert. My identity has been compromised and my credit cards were stolen. The thieves might try to contact you posing as family members in distress, asking for money. Do not send anything. It is a scam. I am working with the fraud department now." So when Bernice called Aunt Sarah, she did not get sympathy. She got suspicion. "Sarah, I need $500, Bernice pleaded. We are stuck in the Bahamas. We were robbed. Robbed? Sarah repeated, her voice cold. That is funny, Bernice, because Keisha just texted us saying her cards were stolen. Are you the one who stole them? What? No, Bernice stammered. It is a misunderstanding. Do not lie to me, Sarah said. I am not sending you a dime. You should be ashamed of yourself. Click. She tried Uncle Marcus. Same result. She tried Cousin David. Voicemail. One by one, the doors slammed shut. They were isolated. They were alone. And for the first time in their lives, they were facing the consequences of their actions without a safety net. They spent the next 3 days in that motel room eating snacks from a vending machine and drinking tap water. They watched the local news on a fuzzy television, seeing tourists enjoying the vacation they had stolen. Tiana stopped posting on Instagram. Chad stopped talking altogether, just staring at the wall. My parents sat on the edge of the bed, staring at each other in silence, the weight of their choices pressing down on them like the humid island air. They were stuck. And back in Atlanta, the bulldozer was already warming up its engine. The silence in the house on Maple Drive was different now. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of a home filled with tension and ungrateful guests. It was the hollow, echoing silence of a structure that had been stripped to its bones. The industrial cleaning crew had finished their work an hour ago, leaving behind nothing but the smell of strong bleach and the faint memory of the chaos that had reigned here for 2 years. The floors gleamed under the afternoon sun, but they looked naked without the rugs and furniture. The walls were bare, the holes Chad had drilled exposed like old scars that had finally stopped bleeding. I stood in the center of the living room holding a clipboard with the final inventory of the sale. The garage sale had been a massive success, clearing out the clutter and putting $14,000 in cash into a lockbox in my trunk. I had recovered the cost of the cruise. I had recovered the cost of the cleaning crew, and now I was about to recover my freedom. A black Range Rover pulled into the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel with an aggressive authority. Marcus Sterling stepped out. He looked exactly like his reputation, tall, imposing, and dressed in a suit that cost more than the average annual salary in this neighborhood. He did not look at the flower beds I had planted 3 springs ago. He did not look at the charm of the front porch. He looked at the property lines. He looked at the street access. He looked at the dirt. He walked up the steps and didn't bother with a handshake. Is it done? he asked, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in the empty hallway. It is done, I replied, stepping aside to let him in. The house is vacant. All personal property has been removed. It is broom clean as requested. Sterling walked through the house with the efficiency of a predator. He did not walk like a prospective homeowner imagining where he would put the Christmas tree. He walked like a developer calculating square footage and demolition costs. He glanced at the kitchen where my mother used to complain that the granite countertops were the wrong shade of gray. He glanced at the bedroom where Tiana had hoarded her designer clothes. He walked past the wall with the structural damage Chad had caused. I started to apologize for the hole in the drywall, explaining that I had documented the damage and was willing to deduct the repair cost from the sale price. Sterling stopped and turned to look at me, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. He laughed, a dry sound that echoed in the empty room. Ms. King, you do not understand, he said. I do not care about the hole in the wall. I do not care about the granite countertops or the hardwood floors you spent so much money refinishing. I am not buying this house. I looked at him confused. But we have a contract. He shook his head. I am buying the land. This house is a teardown. This lot is zoned for high-density residential now, thanks to the new city ordinance passed last week. I am not going to fix the wall. I am going to flatten it. I am putting up a 12-unit luxury condo complex right where we are standing. He walked over to the window and pointed to the backyard where my father used to sit and drink beer while criticizing my career choices. That oak tree is coming down. The deck is coming down. By this time next week, there will be nothing here but a hole in the ground and a foundation crew pouring concrete. I stood there processing his words. A tear down. This house that I had worked so hard to buy. This house that I had poured my savings into renovating, hoping it would be a place where my family could finally be happy and grateful. To Sterling, it was just an obstacle. It was debris waiting to be cleared. I looked around the living room one last time. I thought I would feel sad. I thought I would feel a pang of regret for the loss of the physical structure that represented my biggest financial achievement. But as I looked at the spot where Chad's gaming chair used to be, and the corner where my mother used to sit and judge me, I did not feel sadness. I felt relief. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders that I had not realized was crushing me. This house was not a home, it was a crime scene. It was the place where my boundaries were violated daily. It was the place where I was made to feel small in my own kingdom. Sterling was right. It needed to be raised. It needed to be wiped from the face of the earth so that something new could be built in its place. The memories trapped in these walls were toxic, and the only way to get rid of them was to bring the walls down. Do it, I said, my voice steady and strong. Tear it all down. Sterling nodded, appreciating the lack of sentimentality. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and laid it on the kitchen island. The papers were ready. The title transfer, the bill of sale, the wire transfer authorization. It was a cash deal, fast and brutal. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name on the line transferring ownership of the property at 124 Maple Drive to Sterling Development Group. With each signature, I felt a cord being cut. I was severing the tie to my parents. I was severing the tie to Tiana and Chad. I was severing the tie to the version of myself that allowed them to use me. Sterling signed the line below mine. He closed the folder and pulled a cashier's check from his inside pocket. He handed it to me. $440,000. It was less than the house was worth on paper, but it was more freedom than I had ever been able to buy. He looked at his watch. The deal is done, Ms. King. The wire for the remainder will hit your account within the hour. But you need to understand one thing. He walked to the front door and opened it, gesturing to the street. My crew arrives at 7 a.m. tomorrow. The demolition permits are already pulled. The heavy machinery is being floated in tonight. I am putting up the construction fencing this evening. You have exactly 24 hours to be completely off this property, and I mean completely. Once that fence goes up, this is a construction site and anyone on it is trespassing. I took the check and walked out onto the porch. I looked at the driveway where my family had loaded their luggage just 2 days ago, thinking they had won. Do not worry, Mr. Sterling, I said, walking down the steps toward my car. I never want to see this place again. I got into my car and started the engine. I did not look back in the rearview mirror. I drove away, leaving the empty shell of my former life to the sharks. The journey back to Atlanta was a masterclass in misery. Since I had frozen every card and warned every relative about the potential for fraud, my family had no choice but to turn to the only financial institution that would still take their call, a predatory online payday lender. They took out a high-interest loan just to afford 3 one-way tickets on a budget airline that charged for carry-ons and water. There were no first-class pods or champagne toasts on this trip. They were crammed into the last row of a plane that smelled of recycled air and desperation. Tiana sat in the middle seat between a stranger who fell asleep on her shoulder and Chad, who spent the entire flight complaining that his legs were cramping. My mother, who was used to stretching out in economy plus, was forced to hold her designer purse on her lap because she refused to pay the fee to check it. They endured 2 layovers, spending hours sitting on hard airport floors in Miami, and Charlotte sharing a single bag of pretzels because they did not have enough cash for airport food. By the time they landed at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, it was just past midnight. They were exhausted, hungry, and radiating a level of rage that could have powered the entire city grid. They dragged their luggage to the taxi stand because the Uber app was linked to the card I had canceled. They had to negotiate with a cab driver to take them to the suburbs, promising to pay him cash upon arrival once they got into the house where they assumed they had money stashed away. The ride to Maple Drive was filled with venomous plotting. Tiana spent the 40-minute drive listing the ways she was going to make me pay. She vowed to sue me for emotional distress, for theft of services, and for ruining her anniversary. She told my mother that she was going to contact a lawyer first thing in the morning and file a restraining order to kick me out of the house. She was convinced that she had rights, that her presence in my home for 2 years entitled her to ownership. My mother fueled the fire. She sat in the front seat telling the driver that her daughter was mentally unstable and had suffered a breakdown. She rehearsed the speech she was going to give me the moment she walked through the door. She planned to demand that I reinstate the credit cards immediately and pay for the emotional damage of the trip. She was going to use guilt manipulation and the full force of her maternal authority to bring me to heel. Chad just sat in the back, muttering about how he was going to throw my work laptop into the pool the second he got inside. They were so consumed by their fantasies of revenge that they did not notice the silence of the neighborhood as they approached. They did not notice the lack of cars parked on the street. They were focused entirely on the confrontation to come. They expected to see the porch light on. They expected to use their keys to open the front door and storm into the living room to wake me up and start the war. The taxi driver turned onto Maple Drive, his headlights cutting through the heavy, humid Georgia night. He slowed down as he approached the address, checking the house numbers. 120. 122. My family leaned forward, anticipating the sight of their sanctuary. They were ready to reclaim their territory. They were ready to punish me for my insolence. But as the taxi pulled up to where 124 Maple Drive should have been, the headlights did not reflect off the familiar white siding or the glass of the front bay window. Instead, the beams of light hit a wall of chain-link fencing wrapped in green privacy screen. The taxi driver slammed on the brakes, confused. He looked at the GPS, then at the lot. "Is this the right place?" he asked. My family stared out the window. The manicured lawn was gone, replaced by churned earth and tire tracks. The oak tree was gone. And standing in the middle of the lot, looming like a prehistoric beast in the darkness, was the massive yellow arm of a caterpillar excavator resting on a pile of rubble. The taxi driver killed the engine, but left the headlights on, illuminating the scene in stark, brutal detail. The white picket fence was gone. The front porch swing where my mother liked to drink her morning coffee and judge the neighbors was gone. In fact, half the roof was gone. The house looked like a dollhouse that had been stepped on by a giant. The entire left side, where my bedroom and the kitchen used to be, was missing a gaping wound of exposed insulation and twisted pipes. A massive yellow sign was zip-tied to the chain-link fence. It read, "Property of Sterling Development Group Construction Zone. No trespassing violators will be prosecuted." My mother let out a sound that was half scream, half gasp, and slumped against the car door, her eyes rolling back in her head. Otis caught her by the shoulder, shaking her slightly. "Bernice. Bernice, wake up." But she was out cold, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the disaster. Tiana scrambled out of the taxi, her heels sinking into the mud at the edge of the driveway. She ran to the fence, grabbing the cold metal links and shaking them violently. "My clothes!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "My shoes, my bags, they are in there. Keisha, you witch, where is my stuff?" She rattled the fence again, screaming my name into the empty night as if I were hiding in the rubble, just waiting to let her in. Chad was right behind her, but instead of screaming, he was moving with purpose. He saw a gap where the fence met the neighbor's hedge. He threw his backpack over the top and started to climb, his face set in a grim determination to retrieve whatever was left of his gaming setup. He got one leg over the top rail when a low growl rumbled from the shadows. Two Dobermans, sleek and black as oil, emerged from behind the excavator. They barked once, a deep guttural sound that vibrated in the air and charged the fence, teeth bared. Chad fell back onto the pavement, scrambling away on his hands and knees, his face pale with terror. The taxi driver leaned out his window, his patience finally exhausted. "Hey folks, that is $75 plus waiting time. You paying or what?" Otis fumbled for his wallet, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his credit card into the mud. He picked it up, wiping it on his pants, and handed it to the driver, praying it would work. It did not. "Decline," the driver said flatly, handing it back. "Cash only." While my father frantically searched his pockets for the last of their travel cash, Tiana pulled out her phone. She was hyperventilating, her thumbs flying across the screen. "I am calling the police!" she shrieked. "She tore down our house. This is illegal. This is arson. This is theft." She dialed 911, screaming into the receiver that there was a break-in in progress, that her sister had destroyed her home, that she needed help immediately. They waited by the side of the road, huddled together under the harsh glare of the streetlights. My mother had regained consciousness, but was weeping softly, rocking back and forth on her suitcase. Chad was pacing, muttering threats under his breath. Tiana was still on the phone, demanding to speak to a supervisor. 10 minutes later, a cruiser rolled up the street, its blue lights flashing silently. Two officers stepped out, their hands resting on their belts. My family rushed toward them, a chaotic wave of accusations and tears. "Officer, arrest her!" Tiana yelled, pointing at the empty air where I was not standing. "She destroyed everything." The older officer held up a hand for silence. "Ma'am, calm down. Who destroyed what? Is this your property?" "Yes," Tiana shouted. "I live here. My sister kicked us out and knocked it down while we were on vacation." The officer looked at the demolition site, then back at the hysterical family. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, verify ownership for 124 Maple Drive." Before dispatch could respond, another car pulled up behind the police cruiser. It was a sleek black sedan. The back door opened, and I stepped out, dressed in a sharp blazer and holding a thick file folder. Robert, my attorney, stepped out of the driver's side carrying a briefcase. I walked toward the group, my heels clicking on the pavement, a sound that cut through Tiana's sobbing. The officers turned to look at me. "Officers," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I am Keisha King. Or rather, I was the owner of this property until 48 hours ago. I believe these people are trespassing on a construction site." My mother scrambled to her feet, wiping mud from her designer jeans, and marched toward me with the fury of a woman who had never been told no in her life. "What have you done to my house?" she screamed, her finger jabbing the air inches from my face. "You are insane, Keisha. You cannot just tear down my home because you are having a tantrum. Where are we supposed to sleep? Put it back. She was actually demanding I put the house back like it was a toy I had knocked over. I looked at her calmly, my hands clasped in front of me. Your house. I repeated, my voice flat and devoid of the deference she was used to. That is interesting, Mom, because I do not recall seeing your name on the deed. I do not recall seeing your signature on the mortgage checks for the last 3 years. In fact, if this is your house, surely you have the paperwork to prove it. Show the officers the deed. Show them a utility bill in your name. Show them anything that proves you did not just overstay your welcome in a property I paid for. Bernice sputtered, her face turning a blotchy red under the streetlights. She looked at my father for support, but Otis was staring at his muddy shoes, defeated. We have lived here for 2 years, she insisted, her voice shrill and desperate. That makes it ours. We have rights, squatters' rights. We were filing the papers. Ah, yes, the papers, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. I nodded to Robert. He stepped forward, opening his briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of documents. He handed the top file to the police officer, who accepted it with a raised eyebrow. Officers, this is the warranty deed proving. Ms. King was the sole owner of the property at 124 Maple Drive until 48 hours ago. Robert explained, his voice smooth and professional, cutting through the humidity. And this is the bill of sale transferring ownership to Sterling Development Group completely legally and finalizing the transaction. As for the people standing here, they had no lease, no rental agreement, and paid $0 in rent. Under Georgia law, they were guests, and as the former owner, Ms. King, revoked their invitation prior to the sale. The officer flipped through the documents, shining his flashlight on the notarized signatures and the official county stamps. He looked at my mother, his expression hardening. Ma'am, according to this, you have no legal claim to this land. You are trespassing on private commercial property. The owner has the right to demolish it, renovate it, or turn it into a parking lot. No, Tiana shouted, stepping up beside our mother, her face streaked with mascara and tears. She cannot do this. She is lying. She just wants to hurt us because she is jealous. She is jealous that I have a husband, and she is alone. She is jealous that we went on vacation, and she has to work. She is trying to ruin my life because she is miserable. I laughed then. It was a cold, dry sound that seemed to silence the street. Jealous, I asked, my voice dropping an octave. Tiana, I am not jealous. I am exhausted. I am exhausted of being your bank. I am exhausted of funding your lifestyle while you mock mine. I am exhausted of buying your clothes, paying your bills, and watching you treat me like a servant in my own home. I took a step closer to them, the distance between us charged with years of resentment. You want to know why I sold it? You want to know why you are standing in the mud in the middle of the night with nowhere to go? Because you stole from me. You took my credit card, the one for emergencies, and you spent $13,700 on a cruise. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. That was a gift, she cried. You gave us that card. It was theft. I corrected, my voice cutting like a whip. And since you spent my money, I had to liquidate my assets to pay the bill. I sold this house to cover your vacation. I hope the lobster was worth it. I hope the presidential suite was comfortable, because it cost you a roof over your heads. The reality of what I said hit them like a physical blow. Chad looked at the rubble, then at Tiana, his eyes wide with the realization that his free ride was gone forever. My mother looked at the police officers, who were now looking at her with suspicion rather than sympathy. You sold our home for $13,000, my mother whispered, her voice trembling with horror. I sold my investment property to settle a debt, I replied, and I kept the change. Tiana made a sound deep in her throat, a growl of pure animalistic rage. Her eyes went wild, the entitlement finally snapping under the weight of consequences. She dropped her purse into the mud and lunged at me, her hands curled into claws, reaching for my face, screaming as she charged. Tiana did not even make it 2 steps. Before she could reach me, a wall of muscle in a black suit intercepted her. It was one of the security contractors I had hired specifically for this moment, anticipating that my family would not go quietly. He caught her by the arms, restraining her effortlessly as she screamed and kicked her heels, spraying mud onto his polished shoes. He deposited her back onto the pavement next to her husband, not gently. "Do not touch her," Chad yelled, though he made no move to help, cowering behind the police officer who was now watching the scene with a hand on his taser. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground, watching Tiana unravel with a cold, clinical detachment. This was the tantrum of a child who had finally been told no. I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out a thick, color-coded file folder. It was heavy, dense with the paper trail of their entitlement. "Since you are so concerned about your belongings," I said, my voice cutting through Tiana's sobbing like a scalpel, "let us review the inventory." I kept very detailed records. I opened the file, the pages crisp and white under the streetlights. Item number 1. I read, my tone professional, as if I were presenting an audit to a board of directors. 1 Hermes Birkin bag, orange leather. You told everyone it cost $12,000. I had it appraised by a luxury consignment expert. It was a fake. A high-quality knockoff from Canal Street. I sold it for $200 to a college student who wanted it for a costume. Tiana gasped, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. "Liar!" she shrieked. "It was real. Mom bought it for me." Item number 2. I continued, ignoring her outburst. "Chad's vintage comic book collection. The one he said was his retirement fund." I had a collector look at it. Most of them were reprints. The ones that were original were water damaged from being stored in a damp room. I sold the entire box to a neighborhood kid for $500. He seemed very happy. Chad made a strangled noise, clutching his chest as if I had physically struck him. "My comics," he whispered. "You sold my comics for $500. Item number 3. I went on, flipping a page. "Your designer wardrobe, Tiana." Most of it was fast fashion with the labels sewn in. I sold it by the pound to a textile recycler. Net profit $80. I looked at my mother, who was trembling, her eyes wide with horror. "And Mom, your antique crystal vase collection. The one you said was a family heirloom. It was mass-produced glass from the 80s. I sold the lot for $50 at the garage sale." I closed the folder with a sharp snap that echoed in the silence. "I liquidated everything. Every shoe, every game, every piece of furniture you left in my house. I turned your entire life into cash." I pulled a calculator from my pocket, though I had already done the math a dozen times. "Let us look at the final numbers," I said, tapping the keys for effect. "Total revenue from the sale of your assets came to $14,000. That is everything. Your whole lifestyle liquidated." I looked at them, letting the number hang in the humid air. $14,000. That was the sum total of their material worth. "Now for the deductions," I said, my voice dropping lower, harder. "The unauthorized charge to Royal Caribbean for your little getaway was $13,700. Then there was the cleaning fee for the industrial crew to haul away the trash you left behind. That was $250. I did the subtraction out loud. 14,000 minus 13,700 leaves 300, minus 250 for cleaning leaves 50. Then there were administrative costs. Gas, posters for the sale, my time." I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled wad of cash. It wasn't a stack of hundreds. It wasn't a check. It was a single $20 bill and a $10 bill. $30, I said, holding the money up so they could see it clearly. "This is what is left. This is your inheritance. This is the net worth of your disrespect." My family stared at the money in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. They were paralyzed, stripped of their delusions, forced to confront the mathematical reality of their existence. They had nothing. They were nothing. I took a step forward and tossed the bills onto the wet ground at my mother's feet. They landed with a soft, wet slap in the mud right next to her ruined designer shoes. "There is your change," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth or sympathy. "Take it. Go get some dinner. I hear the drive-thru at McDonald's is open late. And do not worry about leaving a tip. You cannot afford it. My mother stared down at the dirty money, her face crumbling, as the absolute finality of my actions hit her. She realized then that there was no coming back from this. There was no apology that would fix it. There was no guilt trip that would work. I had cashed them out. Chad stared at the money, then at me. His face twisted into a mask of ugly, desperate rage. The humiliation was too much. He didn't care about the house anymore. He didn't care about the police. He just wanted to hurt me. You think this is funny? He screamed, stepping toward me, his fists clenched. You think you can just buy us out with $30? I am going to make you pay for this, Keisha. He lunged. It wasn't the flailing attack of my sister. It was a violent, focused rush. He charged past his wife, past my mother, straight for me. But he never made it. Before he could even raise his fist, one of the police officers tackled him from the side, driving him into the dirt with a bone-jarring thud. Chad grunted in pain as his face was pressed into the gravel, his arm twisted behind his back. "Stay down!" the officer shouted, his knee in Chad's back. "Do not move." I watched without flinching, and then as Chad struggled against the handcuffs, I saw something fall out of his jacket pocket. A small, clear plastic bag filled with white powder landed in the mud next to the $30. The moment the small bag hit the mud, time seemed to freeze. It was a stark white contrast against the dark Georgia clay. Everyone stared at it, the police officer pinning Chad to the ground, my mother clutching her pearls, Tiana, whose screams had momentarily choked off into a strangled gasp, and me watching the final domino fall. "Well, well, well," the officer said, his voice thick with professional satisfaction. "What do we have here?" He reached down with a gloved hand and picked up the bag, holding it up to the light. It was unmistakable. A significant amount of white powder, probably cocaine enough to be considered more than just personal use. Chad stopped struggling. His face, previously red with rage, drained of all color until he looked like a ghost. "That is not mine," he stammered, his voice high and panicked. "I have never seen that before. She planted it. Keisha planted it." The officer laughed, a harsh bark of disbelief. "Son, I watched it fall out of your pocket while you were trying to assault this woman. Unless she is a magician. I think this is all you." He hauled Chad to his feet, spinning him around to slap the handcuffs on his wrists. The metal clicked shut with a sound that signaled the end of Chad's freedom. "You are under arrest for assault and possession of a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent." Tiana let out a wail that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human being. "No!" she shrieked, lunging toward her husband, but stopping short when the second officer stepped in her path. "You cannot take him. He did not do anything. It is just a little party favor. It was for the trip." The officer looked at her, his expression unimpressed. "Ma'am, did you just admit to knowing about this contraband? Because that makes you an accessory." Tiana clamped her mouth shut instantly, her eyes wide with terror. She looked from Chad, who was being shoved toward the cruiser, to me standing calm and untouched on the other side of the fence. Her face twisted with hatred, but beneath it I saw fear, real, paralyzing fear. My mother finally found her voice. She stumbled forward, her designer shoes ruined, her hair a mess. "Officer, please, there must be a mistake," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "He is a good boy. He is an artist. He is just stressed. My daughter." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She provoked him. She stole his home." The officer ignored her, continuing to read Chad his rights as he pushed his head down into the back of the police car. The lights flashed blue and red, illuminating the wreckage of the house and the wreckage of my family. I watched it all unfold with a sense of detachment. I had expected anger. I had expected lawsuits. I had not expected them to be stupid enough to bring drugs back from an international trip or to carry them while trespassing on a construction site. But then again, entitlement often breeds stupidity. They thought the rules did not apply to them. They thought they could do whatever they wanted and someone else would always clean up the mess. Not this time. As the police car door slammed shut, sealing Chad inside, my mother turned to me. Her face was a mask of desperation, the arrogance finally stripped away, leaving only a pathetic panic. She walked up to the fence, gripping the chain link with white-knuckled hands. Keisha, she said, her voice cracking, you have to do something. You have to tell them not to arrest him. You know people. You are a forensic accountant. You work with the law. You can fix this. I looked at her, at the woman who had birthed me, but never really loved me. I looked at the tears streaming down her face, tears shed not for me, or for the pain she had caused, but for the inconvenience of her golden child's husband getting caught. Fix it, I asked, my voice cool and steady. Why would I do that? Because he is family, she cried. Because Tiana needs him. Because we do not have bail money, Keisha. You took everything. We have nothing. I took a step closer to the fence, looking her dead in the eye. You have $30, Mom. Use it wisely. Bernice stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then the realization hit her. I was not going to help. I was not going to save them. For the first time in her life, she was looking at a problem she could not manipulate her way out of. Please, she whispered, sinking to her knees in the mud, her pride finally breaking. Please, Keisha, I am begging you, bail him out. Just this once. Be the bigger person. I looked down at her. Be the bigger person. That was the phrase she had used my entire life to force me to accept their abuse. Be the bigger person meant be the doormat. It meant absorb the pain so they did not have to feel it. I leaned in close so only she could hear me over Tiana's sobbing. I am being the bigger person, Mom, I said softly. I am letting him learn a valuable life lesson about consequences. I am letting him stand on his own 2 feet for the first time in his life. Isn't that what you always said you wanted for us, independence? I straightened up and signaled to my security team. I am done here, I said. Escort them off the property. If they come back, call the police again. I turned my back on my mother kneeling in the dirt, on my sister weeping for her criminal husband, and on the ruins of the house that had been my prison. I walked toward my car, the sound of their pleading fading into the night. I had one more stop to make before this was truly over. And unlike them, I had a plan. You cannot do this to us! Bernice screamed, her voice raw and scraping against the night air. She grabbed the sleeve of my blazer, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman who looked like she was about to collapse. Keisha, listen to me. We have no money, we have no cards. Our phones are about to die. Where are we going to sleep? You cannot leave your parents on the street in the middle of the night. It is dangerous. We are old people, Keisha. I pulled my arm away, brushing the fabric where she had touched me, as if wiping away dirt. The security guard stepped between us again. His arms crossed a silent wall of enforcement. Otis stepped forward, then his eyes wet and pleading. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The bluster he usually carried, the arrogance of the man of the house, was gone. He looked like exactly what he was, an old man who had bet everything on the wrong child. Keisha, please, he said, his voice shaking. I know we messed up. I know you are angry. But look at us. Look at your mother. She is shaking. We have nowhere to go. For my sake, baby girl. Just for tonight. Get us a room. Get us a meal. We can talk about everything in the morning when heads are cooler. Just do this one thing for your father. For your sake, I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. I looked at him, really looked at him. I searched for the father who should have protected his daughter from financial abuse. I searched for the man who should have told his wife that stealing $13,000 was wrong. I did not find him. I only found a coward who wanted a soft place to land. I remember asking you for help once, Dad. I said, my voice calm but carrying a weight that made him flinch. Do you remember when I was 18? Do you remember when I got accepted to Howard University? It was my dream. I worked so hard for that acceptance letter. I came to you and Mom, and I asked for help with the deposit for the dorm room. Just the deposit, $500. Otis looked down at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. You told me you were broke. I continued, the memory as vivid as if it happened yesterday. You gave me a lecture about responsibility. You told me welcome to the real world, Keisha. You said if I wanted to go to college, I had to figure it out myself. And then 2 days later, you bought Tiana a car for her 16th birthday, a brand new convertible. You told me to figure it out. You told me to be an adult. I took a step back, creating physical distance between their tragedy and my success. Well, Dad, welcome to the real world. You are 62 years old. You are adults. You have survived this long. I am sure you can figure out how to survive one night without my credit card. Figure it out, just like I had to. I turned away from them. I did not want to see their faces anymore. I did not want to see the realization sinking in that the Bank of Keisha was permanently closed. I walked past the police cruiser where Chad was banging his head against the window. I walked past the pile of rubble that used to be the living room. I walked toward the shadow at the edge of the property line where I had parked my car. I reached into my pocket and pressed the unlock button on my key fob. The headlights of a brand new Porsche Panamera sliced through the darkness. It was metallic gray, sleek, and aggressive, a machine built for power and speed. I had bought it yesterday morning with a cashier's check using a fraction of the proceeds from the house sale. It was the first irresponsible, selfish thing I had ever bought for myself, and looking at it now, gleaming under the streetlights, it looked like a trophy. My family gasped. They knew cars, they knew status symbols, they knew exactly how much that car cost, and they knew that the money used to buy it could have solved all their problems. Is that a Porsche? Tiana choked out through her tears, her voice thick with envy and disbelief. You bought a Porsche while we are homeless. I opened the driver's side door, the smell of new leather wafting out to greet me. I did not buy it while you were homeless, Tiana, I said, sliding into the seat. I bought it while you were on vacation. I slammed the door shut, sealing out the humid night air and the sounds of their distress. I started the engine, the motor purring with a deep, satisfying rumble. I put the car in drive. I did not look at them as I pulled away. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. I left them standing there in the mud, surrounded by their broken suitcases and the wreckage of their own choices. I left them with nothing but each other, which was exactly what they deserved. As I turned the corner, leaving Maple Drive behind me for the last time, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't sadness. It was the feeling of a heavy chain finally snapping. I was free. Back at the construction site, the dust was settling, but the drama was far from over. Tiana watched my taillights disappear into the night. She looked at her husband in the back of the cop car. She looked at our parents huddled together, shivering on their luggage. She realized that crying wasn't working, screaming wasn't working. She needed a new weapon. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her battery was at 4%. It was enough. She opened her social media app. She fixed her hair as best she could, wiping the mascara streaks from her cheeks. She tapped the live button. She held the phone up, finding the most pathetic angle with the police lights flashing in the background and the ruins of the house visible over her shoulder. The view count started to tick up. 10 people, 50 people, 200. Guys, she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Oscar. Please, help us. You are not going to believe what my evil sister just did to us. We are on the street. She stole everything. We have nowhere to go. Please, someone help us. I sat in the driver's seat of my Porsche, parked a safe distance down the block, watching the digital train wreck unfold on my phone screen. Tiana was really going for it. She was crying about how I had left them destitute, how I was a monster who hated her happiness. For a few minutes, the comments were sympathetic. People were sending prayers and asking for a Cash App link to donate. Tiana looked at the screen, her eyes lighting up as she saw the potential for a new grift. She thought she had won the narrative. She thought she could cry her way into a new bank account. But she had made a fatal calculation error. She assumed she was the first one to tell the story. She did not realize that while they were stuck in the airport on their miserable layover, I had already gone public. 2 hours ago, I had uploaded a public post to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram titled The Truth about the trip. It was not emotional, it was forensic. I attached the screenshots of the $13,000 unauthorized charge. I attached the text messages where my mother admitted to taking the card because Tiana deserved it. I attached the photos of the damage Chad had done to the walls and the legal documents they had drafted to steal my home through adverse possession. I tagged every single family member, every mutual friend, and most importantly, the church pages where my mother spent her Sundays judging everyone else. The tide turned in real time. I watched the comments on Tiana's live stream shift from heart emojis to accusations. One user named Sarah posted a link to my evidence folder. Another user wrote, "Wait, did you really steal your sister's credit card for a cruise?" Then the floodgates opened. The internet does not like thieves, and it really does not like entitled people who beg for money after getting caught. The comments scroll became a blur of insults. "Get a job, Tiana. Pay your sister back. You are crying because you got caught, not because you are homeless." Tiana's face went pale as she read the comments. The tears stopped abruptly, replaced by a look of sheer panic. She tried to delete the comments, but they were coming too fast. People were reporting her Cash App link for fraud. She ended the live stream abruptly, the screen going black, but the damage was irreversible. She had just broadcast her location and her crimes to the world. Then came the notification that hit my mother harder than the bulldozer. It was an email that popped up on my phone because I was still an administrator for the church's finance committee. It was from Bishop Davis at Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church. My mother was the head of the fundraising committee, a position she held onto with an iron grip because it gave her power and status in the community. She loved standing at the pulpit and announcing the tithes. The email was short and devastating. It was addressed to Bernice King. It read, "Dear Sister Bernice, in light of the recent public allegations regarding financial misconduct and family theft, which have brought disrepute to our congregation, the board has voted to remove you from all leadership positions, effective immediately. We pray for your soul, but we cannot trust you with the church's finances. Please do not attend service this Sunday, as we wish to avoid a distraction." My mother checked her phone, standing there in the mud. I saw her shoulders slump as she read the words. That was it. Her social currency was gone. The reputation she valued more than her relationship with me had been vaporized in seconds. She looked around the empty street, realizing that no one from the church was coming to save her. In fact, they were probably already on the phone gossiping about her fall from grace. They needed to leave the construction site before the police arrested them too, but they had a new problem. No one would rent to them. They tried to book a room at the Marriott and the Hilton, but their cards were declined, and their names were now flagged in the system because I had reported the fraud to the credit bureaus. They tried to call landlords for a short-term rental, but a quick Google search of their names brought up my post and the viral screenshots. No landlord in Atlanta was going to rent to a family known for destroying property and squatting. They had no choice. They dragged their broken suitcases down the road, walking for 2 miles in the humidity until they reached the highway. There, sitting next to a truck stop, was a motel with a flickering neon sign. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour. The paint was peeling and the parking lot was full of rusted cars. It was dirty, it was dangerous, and it was the only place that would take cash up front without a background check. They checked into a single room with 2 double beds that smelled like stale smoke and mildew. Tiana refused to sit on the comforter, afraid of catching something. My mother sat in the plastic chair by the window, staring out at the highway traffic, her face a mask of shock. She had gone from the presidential suite in the Bahamas to a roadside motel in less than a week. The fall was absolute. The stress in that tiny room was palpable. They were hungry, tired, and terrified. My father, Otis, sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, holding his head in his hands. He was sweating profusely, even though the air conditioner was rattling away in the window. His face was a grayish color that looked wrong under the harsh fluorescent lights. He tried to stand up to go to the bathroom, muttering something about his chest feeling tight. Otis, what is wrong? My mother snapped, her nerves frayed. Stop being dramatic. We have enough problems. He took one step and then his legs gave out. He grabbed his left arm, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. He tried to speak, but his words came out slurred and unintelligible. He collapsed onto the stained carpet, his body heavy and unresponsive. Otis, my mother screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. She shook him, but he did not respond. Tiana stood in the corner, paralyzed, watching her father struggle to breathe on the dirty floor of a cheap motel. The consequences of their greed had finally taken a physical toll. My mother fumbled for her phone, her fingers slipping on the screen as she dialed 911 for the second time that night. But this time it was not a false alarm. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and despair. It was Grady Memorial, the public hospital where the uninsured and the desperate ended up. My father was in a room down the hall, stabilized but still weak from the minor stroke he had suffered in the motel. The doctors said it was stress-induced, exacerbated by high blood pressure he had neglected for months. He was going to live, but his recovery would be slow and expensive. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, my back straight, my expression unreadable. I had arrived 30 minutes ago after receiving a frantic voicemail from my mother. She had begged, pleaded, and cried into the phone saying they had no insurance because she had let the policy lapse to pay for Tiana's wedding dress 2 years ago. She said the hospital was demanding a deposit for Otis's treatment, and they had nothing. Bernice walked into the waiting room, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She spotted me and rushed over, relief washing over her face like a wave. "Oh, Keisha, thank God you came," she sobbed, reaching for my hands. I pulled them away before she could touch me. She froze, looking hurt. "Keisha, please," she whispered. "Your father is sick. We have no money. They are talking about transferring him if we cannot pay. You have to help us, just this once. We will pay you back, I swear." I looked at her, at the woman who had birthed me, but never nurtured me. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the calculation. She still thought this was a negotiation. She still thought she could leverage my guilt. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I am not here to give you cash, Mom." I said, my voice low so the other families wouldn't hear. "I am here to close the account. Permanently." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. I handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked, her hands trembling as she took it. "Open it," I said. She tore open the flap and pulled out the documents. Her eyes widened as she read the first page. It was a legal notification of financial disassociation. It stated clearly that I was removing myself as a guarantor from every loan, every credit card, and every insurance policy associated with their names. It also included a cease and desist order, preventing them from using my name or credit for any future transactions. But below that was a receipt. A receipt from the hospital billing department, paid in full. "You paid it," she gasped, looking up at me in disbelief. "You paid for his treatment. I paid for his stabilization and 3 days of care I corrected. I paid $7,000. Consider it the final payment on my debt to you for raising me. Consider it the last act of a daughter who tried." Bernice started to cry again, tears of relief mixing with shame. "Oh, Keisha, thank you. I knew you loved us. I knew you wouldn't abandon us. We can start over. We can fix this." I shook my head, cutting her off. "No, Mom. We cannot fix this. This is not a fresh start. This is a funeral." I walked past her toward the hallway that led to my father's room. I needed to say this to him too. I walked into the room where Otis was lying in the bed, hooked up to monitors. He looked frail and small, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him. Tiana was sitting in the corner, scrolling on her phone, ignoring him. When she saw me, she jumped up, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" she spat. Came to gloat. I ignored her and walked to the bedside. My father opened his eyes. He looked at me, and for a second I saw regret. "Keisha," he rasped. I placed my hand on the rail of the bed, not touching him. "Dad, I paid your bill for this stay. You will get the care you need for now. But after you are discharged, you are on your own. I have removed myself from everything. You cannot call me for money. You cannot call me for help." He tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "I am done," I said, my voice breaking slightly just for a moment before hardening again. "I am done being the safety net you cut holes in. I am done being the retirement plan you spent on Tiana. I am done." I looked at my mother, who had followed me into the room. "When I walk out of this door, I am no longer your daughter," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "I am just a stranger who did you a favor. Do not contact me. Do not look for me. Have a nice life." I turned and walked out. I did not look back. I did not wait for their apologies or their excuses. I walked down the sterile hallway, the sound of my heels clicking on the linoleum like a countdown to freedom. Behind me in the room, Tiana stared at my retreating back. She did not look grateful that her father was safe. She did not look sorry for the pain she had caused. Her eyes burned with a cold, toxic envy. She looked at the receipt on the table, the proof of my wealth and power, and she clenched her fists. She was not done. She had lost the house. She had lost her husband to jail. She had lost her reputation. But she still had her rage. And as she watched me leave, she made a silent vow. She was going to make me pay for winning. 1 month later, the peace I had cultivated was shattered not by a phone call, but by a scene straight out of a reality show. I was in my office on the 35th floor of the downtown high-rise. My new promotion came with a corner view and a dedicated assistant. We were in the middle of a strategy meeting discussing a high-profile embezzlement case when the commotion started in the lobby. I could hear shouting even through the glass walls. I stood up and walked to the door, my team looking at me with concern. Down the hall, security was struggling with a woman who was screaming my name. It was Tiana. She looked unhinged. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled, and she was holding a sign made of cardboard that read, "Keisha King is a thief." She had decided that public humiliation was her only remaining card. She saw me and broke free from the guard running down the corridor. "You ruined my life," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble floors. "You put my husband in jail. You made us homeless. You owe me, Keisha. You owe me everything." I did not move. I did not flinch. I watched her run toward me, a desperate woman who had never learned that actions have consequences. Before she could reach me, 2 more security guards tackled her, pinning her to the plush carpet. She kicked and screamed, spitting insults and threats. "Call the police," I said to my assistant, my voice calm. "And get a restraining order." Tiana was arrested for trespassing, harassment, and disorderly conduct. It was not her first time in a police car, but it would be the one that broke her. While she was in the holding cell, she received a letter from Chad's lawyer. He was filing for divorce. He cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the truth. Tiana was broke. Her parents were broke. She had nothing left to offer him, so he was cutting his losses and looking for a new host. The final blow came 2 weeks later. With a criminal record and no skills, Tiana could not find a job in her field, which was essentially existing and looking pretty. She was desperate. She applied everywhere: fast food, retail, warehouses. No one would hire her. Finally, she landed a job with a cleaning service that contracted with large corporate buildings. It was a Tuesday morning. I was walking into my building carrying a latte and reviewing a case file. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the 35th floor. The doors started to close but then reopened. A cleaning cart was pushed inside, followed by a woman in a gray uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a net, her face devoid of makeup. She looked tired and defeated. She looked up and our eyes met. It was Tiana. She froze, her hands gripping the handle of the cart. I looked at her, at the sister who had once demanded five-star resorts and designer bags, now pushing a mop bucket in the building where I was a partner. I did not say a word. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I simply pressed the button for my floor and turned back to my file. The elevator rose in silence, the only sound the hum of the machinery and the soft squeak of the cartwheels. When the doors opened, I walked out, leaving her behind in the metal box, leaving her to clean up the messes of others, just as she had failed to clean up her own. 1 year has passed since the dust settled on the wreckage of my former life. I am standing on the terrace of my penthouse apartment in Buckhead, looking out over the glittering skyline of Atlanta. The air up here is different. It is thinner, cleaner, and completely free of the heaviness that used to follow me everywhere I went. The city moves below me, a river of lights and traffic, but up here there is only silence and the soft sound of jazz playing from the living room speakers. I hear footsteps behind me, solid and reassuring. Robert steps out onto the balcony, handing me a glass of vintage red wine. He is not just my attorney anymore. He is my partner in every sense of the word. We started dating 6 months after the court cases were settled. It was a slow burn, built on a foundation of mutual respect and professional admiration. He does not need my money because he has his own. He does not need my validation because he is secure in himself. For the first time in my life, I am in a relationship where I am not the provider, the fixer, or the safety net. I am just Keisha. We are celebrating tonight. My forensic accounting firm just landed a massive government contract, and I was named the lead investigator. It is the kind of career milestone I used to dream about achieving, the kind I used to think I would have to downplay. So I did not make Tiana jealous, or make Chad feel inadequate. Now I can celebrate it openly. Robert raises his glass to mine, his eyes crinkling with a genuine smile. To the woman who burned it all down to build something better, he says. I smile back, feeling a warmth in my chest that has nothing to do with the wine. My phone vibrates on the outdoor table, buzzing against the glass surface. I glance down. The screen displays a blocked number. I know exactly who it is. It is the first of the month. My mother calls from burner phones or public libraries, usually around this time when the rent at whatever cheap apartment they have managed to find comes due. She leaves voicemails, sometimes weeping, sometimes screaming, always blaming me for their misfortune. She wants me to know how hard it is for them. She wants me to know that Tiana hates her job. She wants me to know that Dad is depressed. I look at the phone vibrating insistently, demanding my attention, demanding my guilt. I feel nothing. No anger, no sadness, no obligation. The cord has been cut. I reach out and press the button to decline the call. The screen goes black, reflecting the city lights above. I do not block the number, because I do not need to. I have already blocked them from my soul. I look back at Robert, who is watching me with quiet understanding. He does not ask who it was. He knows. He offers me his arm, and I take it, ready to go inside to a dinner where I will pay, because I want to, not because I have to. I look out at the city one last time, thinking about the house on Maple Drive that is now just a memory under a new condo development. I think about the money I lost, the time I wasted, and the love I poured into a bottomless pit. It was a high cost, but as I stand here in my beautiful home with a man who loves me and a career that fulfills me, I realize it was a bargain. I lost a house to realize the value of freedom. That is the cheapest price I have ever paid. Do not ever let anyone, even family, leverage your kindness against you. Your generosity is a gift, not an obligation, and if they cannot respect the giver, they do not deserve the gift. I turn my back on the view and walk inside, closing the sliding glass door firmly behind me, leaving the noise of the world outside where it belongs. Keisha's journey teaches a brutal but necessary truth. Toxic family members will drain you until you are empty if you let them. Real love does not require you to sacrifice your dignity or financial security to prove your loyalty. By selling the house, she didn't just recoup her losses, she bought her freedom. The most expensive thing she ever owned was the guilt that kept her tethered to people who only valued her utility. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. Letting go wasn't a loss, it was the ultimate gain. If you believe that peace of mind is worth more than any price tag, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.
As a professional commentator with a deep passion for real-life stories where the line between family and exploitation is pushed to extremes, where small financial decisions can turn lives upside down, I can't help but feel a mix of pride and a shiver. A narrative I've woven myself from the fragile threads of collective memory of unrewarded family sacrifice. This isn't a story to satisfy a thirst for cheap drama or Hollywood-style twists, but a sharply emotional memoir in which the protagonist, Kesha Monroe, a resilient 34-year-old forensic accountant in Atlanta, Georgia, emerges from the darkness of 2 years of exploitation to embrace the light of true control and financial freedom. I wrote it as a personal whisper, inspired by the quiet reflections of friends and my own vague experiences of extended family in the past. Not to judge or encourage blind revenge, but to spark difficult conversations about financial boundaries and blood relationships, the value of being alert to red flags, and the power of decisive action when trust is betrayed. Overall, I'd give this creation a 9.4/10. It culminates in its authentic drama built from everyday details like bank bills and legal papers, its profound message about protecting personal assets as a form of self-love, and its satisfying ending with multi-layered emotional depth. Perhaps I could have added a bit more introspective detail to supporting characters like Tiana or Chad in the aftermath to make their downfall smoother, avoiding the overly harsh feeling in some climactic moments while still maintaining a realistic weight. Now, let's turn the surprising pages of this journey, explore the highlights through my own emotional lens, comment on them with sincerity, objectivity, and a necessary touch of sharpness, and finally, draw lessons that I, and hopefully you, can carry with me as a safe key to the vault of our lives. The story begins with a tranquil yet ominous moment, a period I've devoted many pages to meticulously detailing, aiming to recreate the slow accumulation of invisible wounds, things many of us have experienced without realizing they're gnawing away at our financial confidence through months of silent sacrifice. It was during a tense meeting at an accounting firm in downtown Atlanta, where Kesha Monroe, with over 10 years of experience in forensic accounting, was presenting a financial fraud report to a small business client, when her phone rang with an urgent bank notification. $13,700 had been withdrawn from her emergency credit card, money she'd carefully saved for unexpected medical emergencies. As a last resort, after years of hard work earning an average of $85,000 a year. Where did the expenditure come from? It wasn't some kind of emergency, but a luxurious cruise on the Royal Caribbean, including a presidential suite at the Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas, specifically for the wedding anniversary of Kesha's sister Tiana and brother-in-law Chad, along with her parents Bernice and Otis, who had been living in Kesha's 4-bedroom colonial-style house at 124 Maple Drive for the past 2 years without paying a single penny in rent, only promising to pay later. I described Kesha holding her phone, her face frozen in the middle of a meeting room with PowerPoint slides still illuminating the screen, while colleagues whispered anxiously, and she immediately called her mother Bernice in a calm, almost cold voice. "Mom, who used my credit card for that trip?" Bernice's reaction, a ridiculous excuse. "Tiana needs this trip more, daughter. You never go anywhere anyway. Let the family have fun." Took me to heartbreak while writing, because it was so familiar with how small sacrifices accumulate into a huge burden. My personal feelings while writing? This passage awakened a storm of emotions in me, not because of its immediate drama, but because of its power in placing the reader in Kesha's shoes. The initial shock quickly gave way to cold anger, a feeling I've experienced when discovering friends are being financially exploited by relatives. Commentary on this scene? This is a perfect opening to the theme of one-sided sacrifice in American family culture, especially in middle-class communities of color where family first is often used to justify selfishness. According to Urban Institute studies on family debt, over 45% of Black women in their 30s and 40s are burdened with debt for relatives, leading to chronic financial stress. I deliberately emphasize the contrast between Kesha's professionalism, with her CPA certification and impeccable financial record, and her family's recklessness, using the emergency card like a regular credit card to convey the impending collapse as an unannounced financial storm. If I were to rewrite it, I might add a brief flashback about why Kesha bought that emergency card, perhaps stemming from her grandmother's sudden illness 3 years ago, to increase emotional depth, making the betrayal even more bitter, like a knife twisting into the old wound of her independent loneliness. From there, the story shifts to a deep investigative phase, where Kesha becomes a true detective within her own home and bank account. A plot point I put a lot of effort into building with realistic legal details, aiming to celebrate the power of patience and logic in the face of explosive anger, transforming her from a self-sacrificing sister into a sharp strategist. While her family was dancing on their yacht, posting glamorous selfies on Instagram with the hashtag family goals and the caption, "Paradise with my loves." Ring palm tree, Kesha quietly returned to her home at 124 Maple Drive after work, meticulously documenting every damage and exploitative detail. Stained carpets from Chad's drunken parties, an unemployed salesman with a penchant for alcohol, scratched hardwood floors from his enormous gaming chair, purchased with Kesha's savings from a freelance project, and culminating in a large hole in the load-bearing wall. The result of Chad's attempt to hang a 65-inch TV without any technical knowledge, leading to an estimated $1,200 repair cost. Under her bed, she found her husband's overdue utility bills accumulated over 2 years, proving they had swallowed over $36,000 in utility, gas, and internet bills that she sent monthly under the guise of temporary family support. But the biggest shock and the most striking detail that sent shivers down my spine as I wrote was the worn-out leather briefcase in Chad's desk drawer, labeled New Home Project, filled with printed documents about Georgia's adverse possession law, a legal provision allowing for a legal seizure after 20 years of continuous and public residency. But they shortened it by falsifying documents to prove 15 years. With detailed notes, keep utility bills under Kesha's name to prove exclusive residency, draft a false affidavit claiming they had been sole caregivers for 5 years, in reality only 2, and even a draft lawsuit to force Kesha to relinquish her rights if she objected. They weren't just living in the house. They were plotting to steal the $550,000 home, Kesha's only inheritance from her aunt, which she had personally renovated with $50,000 of her personal savings. Personal thoughts? This passage made me pause several times to catch my breath, as its sophistication was terrifying, not a petty street theft, but a long-term plan disguised as family in need of help, leaving my heart pounding with a mixture of outrage and admiration for Kesha's shrewdness. Commentary? This plot point is a powerful and extremely realistic wake-up call about the legal risks of lending property to relatives. In Georgia, adverse possession is a sleeping monster that many homeowners are unaware of, and I've thoroughly researched state law, Georgia Code Section 44-5-161, to make this account accurate and detailed, highlighting how younger or unemployed generations often view family inheritance as an easy opportunity, rather than a responsibility to respect it. It also critiques the open family culture in America, where blind trust becomes a fatal weakness, leading to financial enmeshment, a toxic blend of personal and family finances, a common problem. According to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where 30% of family disputes involve property. Personally, it evokes memories of advising friends to check property documents before lending, leaving me wondering, are we nurturing these monsters with unlimited tolerance? If I were to rewrite it, I would probably add a monologue from Kesha as she reads those words, revealing her fear of complete isolation, to make the character more multifaceted instead of just a revenge heroine. Not content with mere outrage, Kesha chose decisive action, a decision I would write as a modern epic blending financial drama and family drama. where the protagonist needs no weapons or gunfights, just legal wit, a professional network, and support from strangers to turn her pain into leverage. She immediately called her personal attorney, Robert Hale, a real estate expert with over 20 years of experience in Atlanta, who warned that evicting them as tenants at will under the Georgia Landlord-Tenant Act could drag on for 6 months of exhausting and costly legal proceedings, with the risk of them appealing on adverse possession. Instead, Kesha contacted Marcus Sterling, a tough real estate investor specializing in buying distressed properties for cash through the Zillow and Redfin networks, who offered $440,000 to $110,000 below market value due to damage, but required the house to be empty and handed over within 72 hours. Kesha agreed without hesitation, hiring a professional bankruptcy cleanout team, eviction cleanout services, at a cost of $2,500 to strip the house, tattered Italian leather sofas from Chad's parties, Tiana's fake designer clothes, Louis Vuitton replica bags from flea markets, Chad's PS5 game console, and Marvel comic book collection, damaged by a beer accident, and her mother Bernice's collection of vintage crystal vases, actually cheap 1980s glasses bought at Walmart. Only the truly valuable items, a family photo album from her childhood, and her father Otis's rare jazz vinyl records, were stored in a rented shed 45 minutes away. While her family enjoyed cocktails on the yacht's deck, Kesha organized an impromptu flea market on her front lawn on Saturday mornings, with unexpected help from neighbors like Mrs. Jenkins, a retired housewife with a local Facebook network, and Leo the mechanic, who bought a $50 PlayStation for his son. They flocked to shop Chad's Nike Air Jordan sneakers for $20 a pair, actually fake, Tiana's fake Gucci bag for just $40, and Bernice's collection of porcelain figurines for a mere $30 to a local elderly woman. By late afternoon, she had collected exactly $14,000 in cash, enough to cover the entire $13,700 yacht costs, cleaning fees, and even a small $300 emotional damage to her lawyer. Personal thoughts? This is the passage I wrote with a satisfied smile spreading across my face, mixed with a bit of suspense, like watching a checkmate in a chess game. A cathartic reversal of power where the victim not only gets back but doubles their investment. I could feel the Atlanta autumn breeze sweeping across the lawn as neighbors laughed and shopped for Kesha's family's treasures, turning them into small, humorous bargains, making me clap my hands to myself in my writing room. Commentary? This plot point is the pinnacle of storytelling creativity, celebrating the power of the local community and the sharing economy, like Facebook Marketplace flea markets. While blood relatives betray with greed, it is often strangers and neighbors who become loyal allies, reminding us that family can be judged by actions, not blood ties. It's also a sharp practical lesson in personal finance, turning worthless assets like fake clothes or broken toys into cash quickly through flea markets or apps like OfferUp can be a lifeline in a crisis. And I've researched real-world case study from the subreddit r/personal finance to ensure feasibility, where many people recover 20 to 30% of the value from family junk. If you've ever been financially exploited by a relative, imagine this. Instead of revenge with fists or harsh words, you take out a sales receipt and the keys to a pickup truck, an approach I strongly recommend because it's sustainable, legally secure, and even has a touch of dark humor. Especially since Georgia law protects the right to sell personal property without notice unless there's a formal lease agreement. The climax erupts when the family returns from the cruise, and I spent hours editing this section to balance the intense drama with subtle humanity, avoiding cheap melodrama or excessive vengeful gratification, making it the most powerful heartbeat of the entire story. The cruise ends in slow disaster. In the middle of a lavish dinner at the ship's seafood restaurant, their credit card is declined 3 times in a row for a $2,500 bill. The Atlantis hotel manager announces the presidential suite is now out of booking due to a payment error, and they are relegated to a dilapidated double room overlooking the parking lot at a cheap roadside motel in Nassau, with a musty smell and the rumbling of trucks all night long. They took out emergency payday loans at an exorbitant 400% interest rate to buy cheap one-way plane tickets to Atlanta, landing at midnight at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport exhausted, furious, and dressed in crumpled clothes from their cheap suitcases. Then, the final shock hit like a nightmare. 124 Maple Drive was now a construction site, barbed wire fenced off with 8 feet high, a giant Caterpillar bulldozer sitting amidst piles of concrete and rubble, and construction workers laying the foundation for investor Marcus Sterling's new home project. Tiana, with her disheveled blonde hair and worn-out short wedding dress, screamed hysterically, "My clothes, my shoes. Kesha, you evil witch, you've stolen everything from the family," while Chad lunged at the fence like a wild animal, but was chased away by a fiercely barking German Shepherd guard dog, his clothes torn and his face flushed red from leftover alcohol from the yacht. Bernice fainted on the sidewalk. Otis stammered as he called 911, his voice trembling from a mild stress stroke, and the entire family, calling via family group chat, began swarming the scene in a chaotic mob, filming to denounce Kesha on TikTok. Kesha arrived just in time, escorted by Robert and 2 private security guards, carrying a thick stack of documents. The signed house sale agreement with Marcus, October 15th, cash transferred immediately. A detailed auction receipt from the flea market with a photo of the receipt, and a list of home damages, including holes in the wall, carpet stains, and overdue utility bills. She presented her case clearly, her voice calm as if in a courtroom. Tiana's fake Birkin bag sold for $200 on eBay. Chad's water damage comic book collection fetched only $500 from a local boy. Tiana's fast fashion wardrobe sold by weight for $80 to a local charity. And Bernice's vintage crystal set, identified as cheap via the WorthPoint app, sold for a mere $50 to a vintage cafe. After deducting $13,700 in unauthorized spending, $2,500 in cleanup fees, $1,200 in preventative repairs, and $500 in legal fees, only $100 remained. Kesha threw it into the construction mud as a symbolic gesture. "This is your last legacy. Use it to buy a family dinner at McDonald's. The first time in 2 years without using my money." Tiana lunged forward, scratching, but was gently restrained by Robert. Chad tried to hit Kesha and was immediately subdued by local police, called in due to a break-in alarm. A small bag of white powder fell from his pants pocket, leading to charges of assault and possession of cocaine, a Class A felony under Georgia law, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Tiana, panicking amidst the crowd, confessed to knowing about her husband's drugs in a recorded call to the police, becoming an unwilling accomplice. Personal thoughts? This scene made me tremble because of its chaotic escalation. Not because of the violence, but because of the power of the natural consequences. I pictured the roar of the bulldozer as a frantic soundtrack, the ambulance sirens echoing through the peaceful neighborhood, and Kesha's gaze. No crying, no screaming, just a deadly calm, which made me applaud alone, for it was cathartic to the point of being painful. Commentary? This is the ultimate turning point, exposing the fragility of the ideal family built on exploitation. When financial gain disappears, love reveals itself as conditional and manipulative, a theme explored in depth in Lindsay C. Gibson's book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, which I consulted. Adding the drug element to Chad isn't about absurdly darkening the situation, but rather to illustrate the real cycle of addiction and exploitation in many American families. According to the CDC, 20% of family disputes involve substance abuse, and it criticizes social media as a double-edged sword. While Tiana tried to live stream, Kesha stole everything from us. To garner sympathy, Kesha had already publicly posted evidence, screenshots of receipts, scanned adverse possession documents on LinkedIn and a local Facebook group, quickly turning against her, reporting Tiana's Cash App account for family fraud, leading to account suspension and the loss of her part-time job. The result? Bernice was removed from her position as head of the local church's women's ministry after the scandal spread. The family couldn't afford a new home due to their deep credit history and criminal record. They had to squeeze into a dilapidated motel on I-85, costing $800 a week, and Otis was hospitalized with a $7,000 uninsured stroke bill. Kesha went to the hospital not to offer blind help, but to end things definitively. paying back the original $7,000 from her flea market earnings, but handing over the paperwork to completely sever financial ties, removing her name from joint loans, supplemental cards, family health insurance, and filing for a restraining order under the Georgia Family Violence Act. "I'm no longer your daughter or sister," she said in a flat voice, leaving like a stranger down the neon-lit hospital hallway, leaving behind the heavy atmosphere of permanent breakdown. The escalation continues with ironic aftershocks and long-term lessons, which I write to extend the punishment in a reasonable and humane way, avoiding a feeling of endless revenge or an overly pessimistic ending, turning them into subchapters full of depth about social and personal consequences. A month after the construction incident, Tiana stormed into Kesha's accounting office in downtown Atlanta with a homemade sign that read, "My family property was stolen. Hashtag Justice for Tiana," yelling in the reception area and disrupting a client meeting, leading to her arrest by building security for trespassing and public harassment, an incident that made the local Atlanta Journal-Constitution headline "Family Drama" at the accounting office, costing Tiana her part-time job at the hair salon and causing Sophia, an old best friend, to cut ties with her for being a drama queen. Chad, in jail, files for divorce from Tiana after only 2 weeks, citing financial stress and abandoning her with a $5,000 joint debt from a yacht, while confessing to public defender Tiana that drugs were a way to escape business failures. Unable to find new work in her failing marketing career, Tiana is forced to take a cleaning job at an office building. And in a moment of dark symbolism, Kesha encounters her by chance in the elevator of the Peachtree Center building itself, where Tiana is mopping floors in her drab gray uniform and averted gaze. Not a word, just a polite nod from Kesha, a symbol of a complete reversal of status, from generous older sister to regular customer, and from younger sister in need to invisible cleaner. Personal thoughts? I chuckled sadly, mixed with a touch of melancholy, as I wrote this elevator scene. No dramatic confrontation, just a heavy silence with the repetitive cleaning sounds like a tragic soundtrack, prompting me to contemplate the cycle of poverty caused by greed. Commentary? This scene subtly but sharply highlights the long-term consequences of selfish behavior. While Tiana once needed the yacht to celebrate her marriage, now she cleans to survive on a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, a reminder that life often balances justice in its own way. According to the principle of financial karma that many psychologists like Ramani Durvasula discuss in their books on family narcissism, it also critiques the American social support system, where people like Tiana fall into a spiral of debt and unemployment due to poor decision-making, and I added the detail of her participation in a free rehab program at Grady Memorial Hospital to suggest a glimmer of hope, avoiding an overly bleak ending. In conclusion, after 8 tumultuous months comes a symphony of rebirth and reflection that I wrote to close on a soaring, yet not sentimental note, offering an emotional closure with vivid imagery of Atlanta spring returning after the storm. Kesha is now prosperous in a holistic way, using the proceed from the sale of her house, after taxes and fees, to buy a silver 2024 Porsche Macan S for $65,000, starting a healthy relationship with Robert, the lawyer now her boyfriend, with Friday night dates at the local soul food restaurant, signing a major consulting contract with an international law firm, bringing in $150,000 a year, and even investing $50,000 in a Roth IRA retirement fund to ensure a non-repetitive future. She cut ties completely with her former family, blocking numbers, deleting group chats, and communicating only through her lawyer if necessary, but sent a $1,000 final inheritance to Otis from her personal charity, with a note, "For health, not travel." This is the last. Her grandmother Rosa, the only relative who supported Kesha, sent a handwritten letter from Savannah. "Daughter, you have chosen freedom. That is the greatest gift you can give yourself." Kesha reflected one afternoon on the balcony of her newly rented Midtown apartment, $1,800 a month, with Chattahoochee River views, journaling about her journey. Selling the house wasn't just about recouping the money. It bought me peace and taught me that real family are the people who don't need keys to enter your life. Her final thoughts? Having finished writing the conclusion, I felt a profound sense of relief, like closing a chapter in an old book, with a smile for Kesha's empowerment and a touch of melancholy for what could have been different. This story isn't just hers, but the story of anyone who has ever felt like a walking wallet in their own family. From this entire dramatic, painful, but ultimately empowering journey, the biggest lesson I've learned for myself is don't let family love become an excuse for one-sided sacrifice or financial exploitation. Treat it as a mutual investment, and when red flags appear, like suspicious bills or forged documents, act with evidence and the law instead of blind tolerance. Because cutting ties can be the greatest act of love you can do to yourself that I used to think that unconditional forgiveness was. The key to inner peace, but through Kesha, I learned that silence in the face of exploitation only fuels resentment and debt. Instead, keep tight financial records. Use an app like Mint or Excel to track. Set clear boundaries early on, like a simple rental agreement for relatives staying over. And don't be afraid to leverage community or legal means to protect your assets, because according to Federal Reserve statistics, 40% of Americans experience financial crises due to family support. But those who act early recover 60% faster. For viewers, remember, the house of your life, financial, space, energy, is yours to protect, even from your dearest loved ones. It may be threatened by greed or temporary need for help, but true strength lies in the ability to transform betrayal into freedom, as Kesha did. If you were in her position, being exploited by your family using your credit card or living in their house to seize it, what would you do? Sell it off, cut ties, or try to talk things out? Share your thoughts. This is our story, and I'm here to comment, analyze with you, and together build stronger homes.